The countdown was already running when they pulled me into the chamber, and nobody would tell me how much time I had left. My name is Daniel Whitmore, and 3 hours ago I was the only human sitting inside a ship the size of a small moon, surrounded by beings who had already decided that my entire species was too dangerous to exist. I did not know that yet. All I knew was that the air smelled like burnt metal and cold rain, and that the 2 guards on either side of me had eyes like polished stones, watching me the way a person watches an insect they are deciding whether to crush. They walked me down a hallway made of dark glass, and every few steps a screen would flicker to life on the wall, showing numbers I did not understand. Rows and rows of them, moving fast, like a heartbeat monitor gone wrong. I tried to ask a question. Nobody answered. The guards did not speak. They only pushed me forward, gently but firmly, the way you would guide someone toward an exit they did not want to walk through. At the end of the hallway was a round room with no windows. In the center of that room stood a raised platform, and on it sat 5 figures, tall and thin, wrapped in robes that shimmered faintly like oil on water. Their faces were long, their eyes large and dark, and when they turned to look at me, I felt something I had never felt before in my life. Not fear exactly, something colder than fear, the feeling of being measured. One of them spoke, and the voice came out smooth and even, translated instantly into English by some device I could not see. "You are Daniel Whitmore, representative of the species called human." I said yes, because there was nothing else to say. The being continued. "You have been brought here because a decision is being made about your world. We call this the final review. It is the last step before a world is either accepted into the wider community of thinking beings, or sealed away from it forever." My throat went dry, sealed away. I did not like the sound of that at all. I asked what sealed away meant, and the being on the far left, whose robe was a deep shade of green, answered without any emotion in her voice at all. "It means your planet is surrounded by a barrier that nothing can cross. No ships leave, no ships enter. Your species remains exactly where it is, forgotten, until it either destroys itself or fades away on its own. We do this to worlds we judge to be a danger to others." The room felt smaller after she said that. I looked around at the 5 of them, waiting for one of them to tell me this was some kind of test, some kind of mistake. None of them did. The first being spoke again. "We have studied your species for 11 of your years. We have watched your wars, your arguments, your mistakes. We have read your history, and we have found much to be concerned about. Your kind fights among itself constantly. Your kind spreads quickly. Your kind takes more than it needs and rarely stops to ask if it should." I wanted to argue, but somewhere deep down I knew he wasn't wrong. I had grown up watching the news every night, watching people argue about everything, watching countries struggle to agree on anything at all. It was not a flattering picture, but it was true. Then he said the words that made my chest go tight. 3 cycles ago, another world much like yours was reviewed in this very room. That world showed the same patterns you do. Conflict, growth without limit, a refusal to slow down even when warned. We sealed that world away. Its inhabitants are still there today, cut off, forgotten, exactly as they were the day we closed the barrier. I did not know what to say. My hands were shaking, and I pressed them flat against my legs so the beings in front of me would not see it. The green-robed being leaned forward slightly. "There is one more matter we must examine before the final decision is made. A single number, taken from your own history. We would like you to explain it to us, since none of our translators can make sense of why it exists at all." A screen lowered from the ceiling, silent and smooth, and on it appeared a graph. I recognized the shape almost immediately. It was a population chart, human population, spanning the last 100 years. I had seen graphs like it in school, but this one had a section highlighted in red, right around the middle of the last century, where the line dropped sharply. The being asked me what had happened there. I told them the truth. I said that period marked one of the worst wars in our history. Millions of people had died. Entire cities had been destroyed. Families had been torn apart across the world, and for a long time afterward, nobody thought things could ever be normal again. The being nodded slowly, and then pointed to what came right after that drop. Then explained this. I looked closer. Right after the sharp fall, the line did not creep back up slowly, the way I expected. It shot upward, steep and fast. Faster than the drop itself. Within 25 years, the population had not just recovered, it had grown far beyond where it started. I told them what I remembered from school, about how people rebuilt their homes, how new industries formed almost overnight, how families that had lost everything still chose to start again, to have children, to build new towns where old ones had been destroyed. I told them that even in the depths of that terrible time, People had kept working, kept inventing, kept pushing forward, because giving up had never really been something my species knew how to do well. The 5 beings looked at each other, and for the first time since I had entered the room, I saw something in their expressions that looked almost like unease. The one on the far right spoke for the first time. His voice was lower than the others. We have reviewed over 300 worlds in our history. Every single one of them, when struck by a disaster of that size, took generations to recover, if they recovered at all. Some never did. The number your species produced should not be possible, and yet here it is, recorded plainly in your own history, with no explanation offered by your kind at all, as if it were simply expected. I did not know how to respond to that. To me it had always just been a story from an old textbook. To them it seemed to mean something much bigger. The green-robed being spoke again, and this time her voice had lost some of its coldness. Do you understand what this number tells us, Daniel Whitmore? I shook my head. It tells us that your species does not simply survive hardship. It uses hardship. Where other worlds slow down after loss, yours speeds up. Where other worlds break, yours seems to rebuild stronger than before. This is not something we have measured in any other species in our records. The first being, the one who had first told me about the sealed world, folded his long hands together and studied me for a long moment. This changes the nature of our review, he said. We came into this session believing your species was dangerous, because it grows quickly and fights often. But growth and conflict alone are not enough to seal a world. We have sealed slower species before, ones that pose no threat through strength, only through instability. The real question we must answer is this. If your species can recover from devastation faster than any world we have ever studied, what does that mean for how you would respond if we chose to seal you away today? The room went completely silent. I understood, in that moment, exactly what he was asking. He wanted to know if locking humanity away would actually work, or if it would simply give my species something to push against, something to survive, something to eventually break through. I thought about my answer carefully before I spoke, because I understood that whatever I said next might decide the fate of every single person back on Earth, people who had no idea this conversation was even happening. I told them that humans do not do well when they are told there is no way forward. I told them that throughout our history, whenever someone tried to lock us in, whether it was a wall, a border, a disaster, or an enemy, we found a way to get past it eventually, even if it took generations. I told them that sealing us away would not make us give up. It would simply give us a new problem to solve. And problems were the one thing our species had always been strangely good at solving, especially the impossible ones. The being with the low voice tilted his head. Are you saying that isolating your species could make things worse for us in the future, rather than safer? I said yes. I told him as plainly as I could that if they sealed Earth away, they were not removing a danger, they were only delaying it, and that when we finally did find a way out, we would come out changed, and possibly far less patient with those who had locked us away in the first place. For a long moment none of them spoke. The 5 of them turned toward each other, and their voices dropped into a language I did not understand, fast and quiet, almost like wind moving through metal pipes. I stood there, waiting, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it even through their strange robes. Finally the green-robed being turned back to me. We have reviewed thousands of decisions like this one, she said. In every case, the safest choice has always been to seal away the world in question, remove the danger, and move on. That is the pattern we have always followed, but your species presents something we have never accounted for before. A world that grows stronger from exactly the kind of pressure we use to contain dangerous species. I asked her what that meant for Earth. It means, she said, that sealing your world away might not protect us from your kind. It might simply guarantee that when your species finally breaks through, whether in 10 years or 10,000, you will arrive angrier, stronger, and far less willing to trust anyone who once tried to lock you inside your own home. The first being stood up from his seat, his robe flowing around him like dark water. There is another path, he said, one we rarely offer, because it requires trust we do not usually extend to young, unstable worlds. We could choose not to seal your planet away at all. Instead, we could bring your species into contact with the wider community immediately, under close observation, allowing your people to grow and adapt alongside others, rather than alone and isolated. My breath caught in my chest. That sounded like hope, real hope, the kind I had almost given up on the moment I walked into this room. But he continued before I could feel too relieved. This path carries its own risk. If your species truly recovers from hardship as quickly as your history suggests, then bringing you into contact with others too soon, without proper guidance, could allow your growth to outpace every other world we have ever worked with. We would essentially be inviting a storm into a room full of candles. The being with the low voice added, "And if that storm turns against us instead of working beside us, we may find that we made the decision that ended in our own destruction, rather than yours." I understood then that I was not just fighting for my planet to be saved. I was fighting for them to trust us enough to take that risk at all. I told them the truth, because lying to beings who had already studied my species for 11 years seemed pointless. I said that yes, humans could be difficult, quick to argue, quick to make mistakes, quick to fight even among ourselves. But I also told them that humans had never once given up on the people they cared about, and that whenever disaster struck, we did not simply survive it. We used it to become better, to build stronger cities, better medicine, safer systems, kinder communities in the places where cruelty had once lived. I told them that the very same number that frightened them, the speed of our recovery, was also proof that we did not waste our pain. We turned it into progress. The room fell silent again, longer this time. I could feel the weight of that silence pressing down on me, heavier than anything I had ever felt in my life. Finally, the green-robed being spoke, and her voice, for the first time since I had entered the chamber, sounded almost gentle. "We have never before allowed a single representative to change the direction of a final review," she said. "But your explanation of that number has shifted something in this room that none of us expected. A species that turns devastation into growth is either the greatest danger we have ever encountered, or the greatest opportunity. We do not yet know which, but we have decided that the only way to find out is to give your species the chance to show us." My legs nearly gave out beneath me with relief, but I forced myself to stay standing, because I understood this was not over yet. The first being addressed me directly one final time. "Your world will not be sealed. Instead, your species will be granted limited contact with the wider community, under careful watch, beginning immediately. You, Daniel Whitmore, will be the first bridge between your people and ours. What you do with that bridge, and how your species behaves in the years that follow, will determine whether this decision was wisdom or a terrible mistake." I thanked them, my voice shaking, though I do not think words like thank you truly captured what I felt in that moment. I had walked into that chamber believing I was about to witness the end of everything my species had ever built. Instead, I was walking out with the responsibility of proving that ending was never something we deserved in the first place. As the guards led me back down the long glass hallway, I looked once more at the screens along the wall, still showing rows of moving numbers. This time I understood what I was looking at. Every single one of those numbers belonged to a different world, a different species, each one being measured the exact same way mine had just been measured. Some of those numbers, I now knew, told stories of worlds that had been shut away forever. Others, hopefully, would someday tell stories like ours. When the doors finally opened and I stepped back out into the open air of the docking bay, the sky above me was a strange, pale color I had never seen before, filled with distant lights that did not belong to any constellation I recognized from home. I stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly, trying to steady myself after everything that had just happened. I thought about the number that had changed everything. Not a weapon, not an army, not a single act of strength or violence. Just a simple line on a graph, rising faster after tragedy than any other species those beings had ever studied. A number that proved something about my people that we ourselves had never fully understood. That we do not merely endure hardship, we grow from it, again and again, no matter how many times life tries to knock us down. As I walked toward the ship that would carry me back home, I understood that the story I would tell the people of Earth would not be one of fear, even though fear had filled every part of that chamber. It would be a story of proof. Proof that whatever challenges lay ahead of us now that the wider universe knew we existed, humanity had already shown, through our own history, exactly how we would face them. Not by giving up, not by breaking, but by rising, every single time, stronger than before. And somewhere far behind me, in a chamber I would probably never enter again, 5 ancient beings sat quietly, with a decision that would shape the future of 2 very different worlds, both of them now waiting to see what humanity would do with the chance it had just been given.